My life took an unexpected turn 5 years into my marriage with Paul. We were an ordinary couple. I worked as a teacher, and he managed a team at an energy company. Our life was comfortable, predictable even. But everything shifted when Paul's dad passed away, leaving his mom, Elaine, alone in their family home. One evening, Paul dropped a bombshell. "Anna, we need to talk," he said suddenly, his tone serious enough to make me put my phone down mid-scroll. I looked up concerned. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" He hesitated, taking a deep breath before answering. "It's about Mom. She's all alone in that big house now that Dad's gone. I think we should move in with her." My stomach sank. Move in with Elaine? The thought alone made my pulse quicken. We'd never had the best relationship. She was overly critical, and I always felt like I was under a microscope around her. "Are you serious, Paul?" I asked, my voice laced with disbelief. "You know Elaine, and I barely get along." Paul leaned against the kitchen counter, his expression resolute. "I know, but she's struggling, Anna. She's my mom, and she shouldn't have to live alone. Plus, we're wasting money on this apartment. Moving in would be practical." I exhaled, rubbing my temples. "But this place is ours, Paul. It's our home. Living with your mom? That's a completely different situation." His tone softened, but there was an edge of pleading in his voice. "Anna, it's not just about us. It's about family. Mom needs support right now." I stared at him, feeling boxed in. "Your mom needs us," I countered. "Or you need your mom?" Paul frowned, clearly irritated by my response. "That's not fair. I'm not asking you to live in some rundown shack. The house is huge. There's more than enough space for all of us to have our own rooms." I crossed my arms, the tension in the room building. "And what about the life we've built here? You expect me to drop everything and move in with your mom just because she wants it?" His frustration bubbled over. "It's not about what she wants. I'm trying to think about what's best for everyone." I shot back, unable to hide my anger. Best for everyone? Or just best for Elaine? Paul threw his hands up, his voice rising. "Why can't you just see the bigger picture, Anna? This is about family." I glared at him, my voice sharp. "I am looking at the bigger picture, Paul. Our independence, our life. Not playing happy family in that dark, dreary house of hers." The argument dragged on, neither of us willing to budge. But eventually, for the sake of peace, and because I loved Paul, I gave in. Yet deep down, I dreaded what was to come. Moving in with Elaine wasn't just a change of address. It was a change I wasn't sure I was ready for. Moving day arrived, and it was just as uncomfortable as I'd feared. Elaine's house loomed over us, an imposing, old structure with high ceilings, echoing rooms, and a constant chill in the air that seemed to seep into your bones. Elaine greeted us at the door with a stiff, almost forced smile. "Welcome to my home," she said, her tone brisk. "I expect you to respect my ways." I forced a smile in return, swallowing the lump of dread rising in my throat. "Of course, Elaine. We appreciate you letting us stay," I replied, keeping my tone polite. But living with Elaine was even worse than I'd imagined. It was like living under the watchful eye of a hawk. She had a comment for everything I did, no matter how small or insignificant. "Don't put the dishes away like that," she'd say, her eyes narrowing. Or, "You're overwatering the plants. Do you want to kill them?" It was relentless. Every day felt like a new test, and I was failing them all in her eyes. One night, after enduring an especially harsh critique of my cooking, I couldn't hold it in any longer. As soon as we were in our room, I turned to Paul, my frustration boiling over. "I can't do a damn thing right for your mother," I snapped. "It's like living with a drill sergeant." Paul sighed, rubbing his temples as if he were as exhausted as I was. "Anna, she's old and set in her ways," he said, his tone weary. "Just give it time." "Great," I shot back, throwing my hands in the air. "So, we're just supposed to tiptoe around her until the end of time?" He didn't answer. The look on his face said he didn't have one, and honestly, neither did I. The house. with its cold walls and Elaine's ever-watchful presence, felt less like a home and more like a cage. The weight of her constant surveillance was suffocating, and I couldn't see a way out. Life in Elaine's house was becoming an endless cycle of stress and compromise. Just when I thought I was starting to find my footing, Paul dropped another bombshell. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, and I was in the garden, trying to carve out a sliver of peace amidst the chaos. Paul appeared at the gate, his expression serious. "Anna, we need to talk," he said, his tone instantly putting me on edge. I looked up, my stomach tightening. "What now, Paul?" He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I think you should quit your job and stay home. We're spending a fortune on a nurse and housekeeper for Mom. It would make more sense if you handled it." I stood up, the calm I'd been clinging to evaporating in an instant. "Quit my job? Are you serious?" "Paul, I love teaching. It's not just a paycheck, it's who I am." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration creeping into his voice. "I know that, but try to see the bigger picture. It'll make things easier around here." I stared at him, my disbelief giving way to anger. "So, what? I'm supposed to just give up my career and become your mom's full-time maid and nurse? That's not the life I want, Paul." His tone sharpened as he fired back. "It's not about what we want, Anna. It's about what's practical. Mom needs us. We can't keep paying for outside help." "No," I said firmly, my voice trembling with emotion. "Your mom needs you. I didn't sign up for this, Paul." He threw up his hands, his face flushed with frustration. "Well, things change, Anna. We have to adapt. Isn't that what marriage is about?" That word, adapt, felt like a slap. I loved my job, my independence, the sense of purpose teaching gave me. This wasn't adapting, it was sacrificing. I crossed my arms, glaring at him. "Fine. I'll do it. But don't expect me to be happy about it." Paul exhaled, relief softening his features. "Thank you, Anna. It means a lot." But as I watched him walk away, it didn't feel like I'd agreed to something noble or meaningful. It felt like I'd just lost another piece of myself. Quitting my job was devastating, but the days that followed were worse. My new reality revolved around being a full-time housekeeper, nurse, and cook. Elaine, true to form, had a comment or critique for everything I did. "Those curtains could use a wash," she'd remark with a pointed glance, or, "This soup is much too salty." It was relentless. One afternoon, while ironing her clothes, Elaine launched into another critique. "You're creasing the sleeves wrong," she said, her tone dripping with disapproval. I snapped. "Elaine, can you just stop? I'm doing my best here," I shouted, the frustration pouring out before I could hold it back. She blinked, momentarily taken aback. "Well, I'm sorry if I have standards, Anna," she replied coolly. I slammed the iron down on the board, my voice trembling. "I'm not your servant, Elaine. I'm your son's wife. I gave up my job to be here and help, and all you do is criticize me." A tense silence hung between us. Then, unexpectedly, Elaine's expression softened just a little. I know you're trying, Anna," she said hesitantly. "I'm just used to things being done a certain way." I sighed, feeling the tension drain from me. "I understand, Elaine, but I'm not you. I have my own way of doing things." From that day on, the dynamic shifted slightly. Elaine held back her critiques most of the time, and I made an effort to accommodate her habits where I could. It wasn't perfect, but it was a fragile truce that kept the peace. As time dragged on in Elaine's house, the atmosphere grew heavier, almost stifling. Paul's behavior became increasingly distant and evasive. He started coming home late more often, always blaming work. When he was home, he might as well have been invisible, retreating to the spare room like it was his fortress of solitude. One evening, I'd had enough. The silence and distance were gnawing at me, so I cornered him in the kitchen. "Paul," I said firmly, "what's going on with you? You're hardly here anymore, and when you are, it's like you're not even my husband." He avoided my eyes, stirring his coffee like it held the answers to my questions. "Work's been a nightmare," he muttered. "It's just a lot of stress." I leaned against the counter, arms folded, staring him down. I get stressed, Paul. But this isn't just stress. You're shutting me out. You're here, but you're not really here. He sighed heavily, still avoiding my gaze. I don't know what you want me to say, Anna, he said, his voice flat. I'm just really tied up with stuff right now. I wanted to believe him, to accept his words at face value, but something inside me screamed that there was more to the story, something he wasn't telling me. Lucy, Paul's sister, seemed to delight in adding fuel to the fire whenever she visited. Every encounter with her was an exercise in patience. Still stuck in this old dump, huh? She'd sneer, her eyes sweeping over the house like it offended her. Most days, I swallowed my frustration, but one afternoon, her relentless taunts hit a nerve. Not all of us have the luxury of mooching off others, Lucy, I snapped, my voice sharp. Her laughter grated on my already frayed nerves. Oh, look at you, she mocked. Playing the martyr in this haunted house. Pathetic. I clenched my fists, biting back the torrent of words threatening to spill. What hurt more than her words, though, was Paul's silence. He stood by, offering no defense, his quiet complicity another reminder of the widening gap between us. The biggest shift in the household came not from Lucy's barbs, but from Elaine herself. One evening, her frail voice echoed down the hallway. Lucy, she called, her tone wavering, I need help with the bath. I can't manage on my own anymore. Lucy's response was as cold as the chill that hung in the house. Help yourself, Mom. I'm not your caretaker. Elaine's quiet sobs pierced through the tension, and despite our history, I couldn't ignore her pain. I stepped in, guiding her gently to the bathroom and helping her. The gratitude in her eyes that day shifted something between us. Afterward, Elaine softened. She treated me less like an outsider and more like a daughter. It was a welcome change, one that eased some of the tension in the house. But even as her warmth grew, the distance between Paul and me felt more glaring. The house felt colder, emptier, even with Elaine's change in demeanor. Paul's late nights became a norm, and our conversations grew sparse and hollow. One evening, during a rare interaction, Paul casually dropped a new piece of information that knocked the air out of my lungs. Anna, he said, leaning against the kitchen doorframe, I got an apartment near work. I froze mid-motion, the dish I was washing slipping slightly in my hand. An apartment? I repeated, my voice tinged with disbelief. Why would you need that? He avoided my gaze, his tone annoyingly nonchalant. It's practical, he said. Saves me the commute, especially with all the late nights. Anger bubbled up, mixing with confusion. And you just decided this without even talking to me? What are we now, roommates? Paul shrugged, his indifference cutting me to the core. I thought you'd be happy. Less stress about me coming home late. I set the dish down, my hands trembling. Happy? This feels like you're living a double life, Paul. What's next? Are you going to tell me you have a second family there? Don't be dramatic, Anna, he said, rubbing his forehead in frustration. It's not like that. I wanted to push him further, to force him to break through the nonchalant facade he'd been wearing for weeks. But I knew it was pointless. The conversation ended there, just like so many others lately, unfinished, unresolved, and heavy with unspoken truths. The true shock came a few days later during an unexpected and candid conversation with Elaine. We were sitting in the living room, enjoying a rare moment of calm, when she said something that stopped me in my tracks. You know, Paul didn't buy that apartment with his money, she said, her voice low. I turned to her, puzzled. What do you mean? Elaine hesitated, as if deciding whether to continue. Finally, she sighed. He used my savings. Told me it was an investment. He even put the apartment in my name. My heart sank. He's been using your money, and you're okay with this? Elaine shrugged, her expression a mix of resignation and sadness. What was I supposed to do? He's my son. But I thought you should know. I was speechless. Paul's secret apartment was one thing, but using his mother's savings under the guise of an investment? It felt like the man I married was disappearing, replaced by someone I barely recognized. A few days later, I confronted him.
Paul.
I said, my tone sharp, "Why didn't you tell me the apartment was bought with your mom's money?" He didn't flinch, didn't even look guilty. Instead, his expression was defiant. "Because I knew you'd react like this," he said, crossing his arms. "It's an investment, Anna. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal?" I repeated, incredulous. "You're gambling with your mom's savings and keeping it from me? What else are you hiding?" He turned away, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. "You wouldn't understand, Anna. It's business." "Business," I echoed, the word leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. It wasn't just an excuse. It was a chasm growing between us, one that seemed impossible to bridge. Living in Elaine's house felt like it was slowly eroding my spirit. The once vibrant walls were now drab and lifeless, and every creak of the old floorboards seemed to echo the weight of unspoken words. One day, unable to bear the oppressive atmosphere any longer, I decided something had to change. "Elaine," I said over breakfast, "have you ever thought about renovating the house? A little freshening up might do wonders." She looked up from her tea, surprised. "Renovate? I haven't considered that in years. It's such a big task." I nodded, feeling a flicker of excitement. "I know, but even small changes, like a coat of paint or some new wallpaper, could brighten up the place." Elaine studied me for a moment before nodding slowly. "Well, I suppose it wouldn't hurt. But are you sure you're up for it?" I smiled, eager for something positive to focus on. "Absolutely. It'll be a good change for both of us." And so, I dove into the project with enthusiasm. I painted walls, picked out new wallpaper, and even took a crack at restoring some of the house's old furniture. It was exhausting, but it felt good, like I was bringing life back into the house and reclaiming a part of myself in the process. One afternoon, while I was knee-deep in paint supplies, Paul came home. He walked into the living room, his eyes wide as he took in the transformed space. "What the hell, Anna?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "What are you doing to my mom's house?" I stood up, wiping the paint smudges off my hands. "I'm renovating, Paul. Like I told Elaine. This place needed some attention, and I'm giving it the care it deserves." Paul's face flushed with anger. "You had no right to start changing things without asking me. This is my family home, not some weekend project for you to mess around with." His words hit a nerve, and I felt my temper flare. "Your family home? When was the last time you actually cared about this house, Paul? I'm doing something good here, something your mom even supports." He stepped closer, his voice rising. "You always do this, Anna. You take over, push everyone else aside. Like you're the only one who knows what's best." I stared at him, stunned by his accusation. "Push everyone else aside? Paul, I'm trying to make this house livable. If you actually spent time here, maybe you'd understand." Before he could fire back, Elaine entered the room. Her presence immediately shifted the energy. "What's all this shouting about?" she asked, her sharp eyes darting between us. Paul turned to her, his voice laced with frustration. "Mom, did you know about this? About Anna changing the house?" Elaine's gaze softened as she looked at me, then back at Paul. "Yes, I did. And I'm glad she's doing it. This house needed a change, and Anna has been doing a wonderful job." Paul looked as though she'd slapped him. "But it's our family home." Elaine cut him off, her voice firm. "It's my home, Paul. And I want this. Anna has done more for me and this house than anyone else." Paul's jaw tightened, and without another word, he stormed out of the room. The silence that followed was heavy and awkward. I felt a flicker of vindication, but it was tinged with sadness. The house was transforming, yet the divide between Paul and me seemed to grow with each passing day. Everything changed the day Elaine suffered her stroke. One moment she was chatting with me over tea. The next her words slurred, and she slumped in her chair. Panic took hold as I called for an ambulance, my voice trembling. At the hospital, the weight of the situation became clear. Elaine would need constant care from now on. I turned to Paul, expecting to find the concern and support of a son, but what I saw instead was cold indifference. "Anna, I can't deal with this," he said flatly. "I have enough on my plate already." I stared at him, stunned. "You can't deal with this? Paul, this is your mother. She needs us." His laugh was bitter and hollow. "She's been a burden for years, Anna. This is just the cherry on top." I couldn't hide the disgust in my voice. "She's not a burden, Paul. She's your family. She's our responsibility." He shrugged, his tone cutting. "No, Anna. She's your responsibility. I've got other things to worry about." His words left me reeling, the final crack in a marriage that was already crumbling. The woman looked polished, with a confident demeanor that clashed with the somber atmosphere of the funeral. Her presence sent a ripple through the mourners. Paul's arm was draped casually around her shoulders, and the two children clung to her hands as if she were their anchor. As they approached, I felt my chest tighten. The audacity of bringing someone like this to Elaine's funeral, someone I'd never seen or heard of, was beyond comprehension. "Paul," I said, stepping forward, my voice barely above a whisper, but sharp with accusation. "Who is this?" He looked at me with a mix of guilt and defiance. "This is Valerie," he said flatly. "My partner. And these are her kids." I blinked, struggling to process his words. "Partner?" The word hung in the air, thick with implication. "Yes, Anna," he said, his tone dismissive. "We've been together for a while now."
A while.
The words hit me like a slap. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment affair. This was deliberate.
Calculated.
"You bring her here?" I hissed, trying to keep my voice steady as onlookers began to notice the tension. "To your mother's funeral? Do you have any respect left for her or for me?" Paul's expression hardened. "Look, I didn't want to fight with you today. We're all here to pay our respects." Valerie stepped forward, her tone sugary and condescending. "I told Paul this might be awkward, but we wanted to show support for the family." "Support?" I snapped, unable to contain my anger. "You have no idea what this family has been through. You don't belong here." Paul's voice dropped, low and icy. "Enough, Anna. Don't make a scene." I took a step back, my hands trembling. I glanced at the children, who were watching silently, their eyes wide with confusion. For their sake. I swallowed the words burning on my tongue. But the damage was done. As Paul and Valerie walked away to join the other mourners, I stood frozen, the weight of betrayal crushing me. After the funeral, I returned to Elaine's house, now empty, quiet, and unbearably cold. The walls that once echoed with her sharp wit and warm laughter now felt hollow. I wandered through the rooms, memories flooding back with every step. But as I sat in the living room, surrounded by the remnants of her life, something clicked. I didn't belong here anymore. This wasn't my home, it never had been. The next morning, I began packing my things. I reached out to a friend, asking for a temporary place to stay. I didn't bother telling Paul. Let him find out when he finally decided to show up. This wasn't defeat, it was liberation. I had done everything I could, given every ounce of myself to a family that never truly cared. Now it was time to start over. To build a life where I wasn't constantly fighting to prove my worth. As I closed the door behind me for the last time, I felt a strange sense of relief. The chapter was over. But my story was just beginning. Paul's accusations and Lucy's venomous words hung in the air long after they left, their voices replaying in my mind like a haunting refrain. I sank into a chair in the living room, the weight of the day pressing down on me. The house, now legally mine, felt like both a gift and a curse. Elaine's kindness had given me a sense of validation, proof that all I'd endured hadn't gone unnoticed. Yet, the bitterness of Paul and Lucy's betrayal left a sour taste. I spent the next few days going through Elaine's belongings. Each photo, letter, and keepsake told a story of a woman who had lived a life full of strength and sacrifice. As I sorted through her things, I found a letter addressed to me tucked away in her jewelry box. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. Asterisk, Dear Anna, I don't know if I'll ever find the words to thank you for what you've done for me in my final years. You gave me dignity when my own children turned away. You saw me as more than a burden. And for that, I am eternally grateful. Leaving everything to you wasn't a decision made out of spite, but out of love and respect. You deserve a fresh start, free from the pain and betrayal you've endured. Take this house, this gift, and build the life you've always deserved. With all my love, Elaine *. Tears streamed down my face as I read her words. This was more than just an inheritance. It was her way of setting me free. A week later, as I began making plans to sell the house and move forward, Paul and Lucy made good on their threat. I received a notice from their lawyer, contesting the will. The accusations were laughable, manipulation, undue influence, but I knew they were grasping at straws. Chloe, my lawyer, reassured me. They don't have a case, Anna. Elaine's will was airtight. This is just an attempt to wear you down. I nodded, determination hardening my resolve. Let them try. I'm not backing down. The legal battle dragged on for months, with Paul and Lucy growing more desperate at every turn. Their attempts to discredit me backfired spectacularly when my dedication to Elaine was brought to light. Witnesses, neighbors, friends, even hospital staff spoke on my behalf, painting a picture of a woman who had stepped up when her own family had failed her. The court's decision came down in my favor. Elaine's will was upheld, and Paul and Lucy's claims were dismissed. Their fury was palpable, but I no longer cared. I had fought for Elaine, for myself, and I had won. With the legal battle behind me, I sold the house and used the money to start fresh. A cozy apartment in the city became my new sanctuary, free from the shadows of the past. I returned to teaching, reconnecting with the part of me that had been buried under years of sacrifice. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I thought of Elaine. Her voice, her presence, and her unwavering kindness stayed with me. She had given me more than just a house. She had given me a chance to reclaim my life. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. And I knew, wherever Elaine was, she'd be proud. As I stood in the quiet house, holding Elaine's will, I felt the weight of her decision settle over me. She had left everything to me, not as a reward, but as recognition of the love and care I had shown her in her final years. It wasn't about wealth, it was about trust, about family, about loyalty. Paul and Lucy couldn't see it that way. The next day, they stormed back into the house, their anger unchecked. You think you can just walk away with everything? Paul bellowed, his face red with frustration as he barged into the living room. I looked up from the paperwork I had been organizing, my voice calm but firm. This wasn't my decision, Paul. It was Elaine's. Her will is clear. Lucy stepped forward, her voice trembling with fury. You manipulated her, took advantage of her when she was vulnerable. We're not letting this go. I stood, my patience wearing thin. Manipulated? While you two were off living your lives, I was here. I cared for her, stayed by her side when no one else did. Elaine chose this because she knew who truly cared about her. Paul's fists clenched at his sides. You think you're better than us because you played the hero? You've got no idea what family really means. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Family? Paul, family doesn't abandon their own. Elaine deserved better than to be treated like a burden. The tension in the room crackled like static until the doorbell rang. The lawyer had arrived, carrying with him the proof of Elaine's decision. In his hands was a video recording, a message from Elaine herself. He set up the laptop, and her voice filled the room. If you're watching this, Elaine began, her tone resolute. It means I've made my final choice. Anna, you were there for me in ways my own children weren't. You cared for me, fought for me, and gave me love when I needed it most. I leave everything to you, not to punish Paul and Lucy, but because you were like the daughter I never had. You earned this. The silence in the room was deafening. Paul's jaw tightened, his face pale. Lucy sank into a chair, tears streaming down her cheeks. For the first time, they seemed to realize what they had lost, not just material possessions, but their mother's respect and love. They left soon after, their threats hollow now that the truth was out. The house was mine, empty, yet filled with echoes of Elaine's words and her faith in me. The months that followed were transformative. I filed for divorce, finally freeing myself from a marriage that had been crumbling for years. Paul and his new family moved to a modest rental, and Lucy's life spiraled further as her debts and bad decisions caught up to her. I sold Elaine's house and used the funds to purchase a smaller, cozier place, a home that felt like mine. It wasn't just about the physical space. It was about starting fresh, unburdened by the weight of the past. In my new home, I found joy in small things, decorating the walls, planting a garden, and rediscovering who I was outside of the roles I had played for so long. Elaine's gift wasn't just the money or the house. It was her belief in me, her reminder that I was capable of building a life worth living. I carried her memory with me, her voice echoing in my mind during quiet moments. Be strong, Anna. You deserve this. And for the first time in years, I believed it.